The funeral director waited until the pastor lowered his voice over my mother's coffin. Then he leaned close enough that no one else could hear and said, "Your mother paid me to bury an empty coffin." I was still holding the white rose I meant to drop onto her grave. My fingers went numb. Before I could ask whether grief had made me misunderstand him, he pressed a brass key into my palm and whispered, "Unit 16, go now. Do not go home." At first I thought he had come to offer condolences. Earl had known my mother for years. A decade earlier, she had arranged and prepared for her own funeral at Meadow Rest, listing every detail herself because she was the kind of woman who never liked leaving important things to chance. Earl later told me she visited him 3 times in the month before the crash. The first time, she updated flowers and hymns. The second, she asked about sealed caskets and cemetery timing. The third, she made him promise that if anything felt wrong, he would follow the instructions exactly and ask questions afterward. He thought she was frightened of illness. He did not realize she was designing the one public event Hale would be arrogant enough to trust. He stood beside me silently for a moment while the pastor continued speaking. Then he leaned closer. "Ms. Carter," he whispered, "your mother paid me to bury an empty coffin." For a second, I thought grief had twisted his words inside my head. "What?" I whispered. Earl did not smile. He slipped something cold into my hand, a small brass key. The tag read Unit 16. "Don't go home," he said quietly. "Go to Safelock Storage, Unit 16, right now." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my coat pocket. A text message glowed on the screen. From my mother. "Come home alone." My mother had been dead for 6 days. The letters looked ordinary. That was what made them unbearable. Same contact photo, same name, same small gray bubble at the top of the screen. I had spent 6 days wishing for one more message from her. One more reminder to check my oil or lock the balcony door. Now the impossible message was here, and every part of me wanted to throw the phone into the open grave. At least, that was the fact every official document repeated. Her car had been found at the bottom of a ravine after a fire. A body in the driver's seat carried her identification and matched her height, blood type, and dental summary. The coroner discouraged viewing because of the damage, but I insisted. What I identified was a familiar wedding ring and the outline of a woman beneath a sheet. I never saw her face. Grief made that omission feel merciful. Now it felt engineered. I replayed the identification room in my mind. The cold metal table. The coroner's careful voice. The smell of antiseptic that could not hide smoke. He had guided my eyes toward the ring before I could ask about her face. At the time, I believed he was sparing me. Standing at the cemetery with the key biting into my palm, I wondered how many people had been gently guided away from the one thing that would have saved them. My mother, Ruth Carter, had spent 19 years as an estate accounts specialist at Lawson Financial. She dressed plainly, arrived early, and believed every important paper deserved 2 copies in separate places. When I teased her, she said disasters prefer people who assume records will always remain where they left them. As a child, I thought her caution was a personality quirk. She labeled batteries by expiration date. She kept emergency cash inside a hollow cookbook. She made me memorize phone numbers when every other kid trusted contacts saved in a phone. I was embarrassed by it. At sleepovers, I joked that my mother prepared for disasters the way other women prepared for holidays. Years later, standing beside her supposed grave, I realized those habits had been her love language all along. 3 months before the crash, she became distracted. She changed passwords, stopped discussing work, and asked whether my apartment had cameras. Once, she called at midnight merely to confirm I was home. I assumed age was making her anxious. At her funeral, Richard Hale described her as loyal. I remember the pause before that word, not brilliant, not kind, loyal, as if obedience were the only part of her life worth praising. I had identified her body myself. I had signed the papers. I had arranged the obituary. I had stood beside her coffin that morning, while people told me she was in a better place. But now her name was glowing on my phone, like she had simply stepped out for groceries. When I looked up, Earl had already returned to the grave. No one else seemed to notice anything. I put the key in my purse and walked to my car. 20 minutes later, I reached Safelock storage near the highway. Unit 16 sat in a row of identical metal doors behind a chain link fence. My hands shook so badly I dropped the key twice. When I finally lifted the door, I froze. Inside was no furniture, no boxes, no old decorations. Only a folding chair, a lantern, 3 jugs of water, a legal file box, and my mother's navy handbag. The handbag contained ordinary items arranged too carefully: lipstick, tissues, a grocery receipt, and an expired train ticket. Beneath the lining, I felt a hard rectangle. It was a second phone with no saved contacts and 1 audio file. My mother's voice filled the dark unit. It was thin through the tiny speaker, but unmistakable. The same low steadiness she used when balancing accounts at the kitchen table. The same little catch on my name. Hearing her did something cruel to me. It handed me hope with one hand and reminded me with the other that recordings can outlive people very easily. Emily, if you are hearing this, someone followed the funeral plan. Do not wait for certainty. Certainty is what Hale uses to keep decent people standing still. She explained that the text messages from her number were scheduled through an encrypted service. Some would be sent only if Earl entered a confirmation code after the burial. The system was not proof she remained alive. It was a trail prepared in case she could not guide me herself. That distinction frightened me more than hope. The same handbag police said had been found with her. An envelope was taped to it. My name was written across the front in her handwriting. For Emily, if you're reading this, they lied to you first. Then, behind me, tires crunched over gravel. Every sound inside the storage unit sharpened. The lantern buzzed. My own breath scraped. The metal door gave a tiny pop as the afternoon heat shifted it on its track. I slid the phone into my coat and stared at the strip of sunlight under the door, waiting for a shadow to cross it. When it did, I finally understood that my mother's fear had not been paranoia. It had been a schedule. A black SUV rolled into the lane 2 rows away and stopped with its engine running. I recognized it. Richard Hale had arrived at the funeral in the same vehicle. Although a driver kept the rear plate obscured by mud, the man now approaching Unit 16 had stood near the chapel doors pretending to check condolence cards. My mother had known they would search the storage facility eventually. She counted on grief making them wait until after the burial. I pulled the storage door down, slipped inside, and lowered it until only a thin strip of daylight remained. Footsteps approached slowly. Then a man's voice came through the metal door. "Ems. Carter, we only want to talk." I said nothing. Another voice followed, sharper this time. "Your mother involved you in something she shouldn't have." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The note was short. "Emily, if anyone follows you here, do not trust the police, Richard Hale, or anyone from Lawson Financial. Take the red folder and leave through the back fence. I'm sorry." Richard Hale had been my mother's boss for 19 years. That morning, he had hugged me at her funeral. I had thanked him for coming. He had smelled like expensive soap and wintergreen mints. He had placed both hands on my shoulders and told me Ruth had been like family. I remembered apologizing because I had cried on his lapel. The memory made my skin crawl. Predators do not always stand outside the circle of mourners. Sometimes they sign the condolence book first so everyone sees where they belong. Outside, something scraped against the lock. I opened the file box at my feet. Inside were labeled folders, a flash drive taped under the lid, bank records, copies of documents, and one red folder filled with wire transfer records and signatures. The labels were written in her careful block letters: false fees, deed transfers, insurance diversions, law enforcement payments. Each folder had a duplicate index card tucked inside, as if she expected the person opening the box to be shaking too hard to think clearly. She knew me well enough to prepare for my panic. That tenderness, hidden among records of theft and violence, almost broke me. Then I saw the back wall. A sheet of plywood covered part of it. Behind the plywood was a section of chain link fence that had already been cut open. My mother had prepared an escape route. On the other side of the fence, an old bicycle waited beneath camouflage netting. Its tires were full. A map taped to the handlebars marked a drainage trail that avoided street cameras and ended behind a closed garden center. My mother had not ridden a bicycle in 20 years. She hated them. She said they made adults look as if they had lost an argument with gravity. Yet there it was, oiled, hidden, ready. I imagined her in the dark, testing the chain with injured hands, choosing a route for me she hoped I would never need. Fear can be love wearing work gloves. Every detail told me my mother had prepared for fear while still experiencing it. She had crawled through this gap, inflated these tires, and imagined me running alone. Anger joined my terror. Whatever explanation waited at the end, she had placed me inside a plan without my consent. The man outside spoke again. "Open the unit, Emily. Your mother is dead because she stopped cooperating." That sentence told me everything. She had not simply died. Someone had made it happen. The thought came with a strange steadiness. Grief had been fog. Fear was a blade. If someone had made this happen, then someone had left marks. Tire tracks, calls, signatures, payments, habits. My mother believed in records because records could survive panic. I pulled the red folder against my chest and decided I would survive long enough to deliver them. I grabbed the red folder, pushed the plywood aside, and crawled through the fence. The wire tore my blouse, but I kept moving. Behind me, someone slammed against the unit door. I ran through weeds along a drainage path until I reached the service road near the highway. Then my phone buzzed again. 2 more texts from my mother's number. "Go to Daniel Brooks, County Recorder's office. Trust no one else." A minute later, and Emily, "If Hale finds you first, burn everything." Daniel Brooks looked like the last person who could change everything. He also looked terrified. That detail helped me trust him. Powerful people in my life had spent the week sounding certain the coroner Hale, the funeral staff, before Earl broke ranks. Daniel's fear felt honest. He kept glancing toward the office windows, not because he wanted to dramatize the danger, but because he knew paperwork could get people killed when the right signatures pointed to the wrong money. He had been my mother's first choice because he was almost invisible inside county government. Lawson Financial handled estates after deaths. Daniel recorded property transfers created by those estates. For 2 years, he noticed widows selling homes to the same group of shell companies at prices far below value. When he questioned the pattern, a supervisor told him grieving families made irrational choices. Then the supervisor paid cash for a new boat. Daniel began copying public records. My mother found him after a client's deed changed 3 days following her death, bearing a signature made when the woman was already in intensive care. Separately, they had suspicions. Together, they had a map. He sat behind a plain government desk at the county recorder's office, wearing rolled-up sleeves and a coffee-stained tie. But the moment I walked in, he stood. "Emily Carter," he said, not a question. "My mother sent you," I replied. "She said you might come." He handed me another sealed envelope in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 3 weeks before her supposed death. My mother explained everything. Lawson Financial had been stealing client money through shell accounts and fake estate transfers. She had discovered the records by accident. When she confronted Richard Hale, he used her own access credentials to frame her. The scheme targeted people least able to challenge paperwork: elderly clients, recent widows, heirs living abroad, and families overwhelmed by sudden death. Hale's team created false fees, redirected insurance proceeds, and transferred property through temporary trusts. By the time beneficiaries understood, the assets had passed through enough companies to look unreachable. My mother discovered her credentials attached to transfers she never authorized. Hale showed her the audit trail and said she would be prosecuted if she spoke. Then he displayed photographs of me entering my apartment and leaving work. She pretended to surrender. For 8 weeks, she copied records while helping Hale build the case meant to frame her. Daniel preserved deeds. Earl created funeral paperwork under attorney instructions he believed were part of witness protection. Audrey Marsh, the federal agent, coordinated the actual operation, but a leak inside local law enforcement forced them to keep the circle small. The deputy coroner was that leak. Audrey later admitted the leak had nearly collapsed the case twice. A warrant request mentioned too early. A surveillance detail described to the wrong supervisor. A sealed interview that Hale seemed to anticipate. Each breach made my mother more isolated. And each isolation made her choices look stranger from the outside. That is how corruption protects itself. It makes the truthful person appear erratic while the organized lie looks official. Then he threatened me. So she pretended to cooperate while secretly copying everything. She arranged the empty coffin because if Hale believed she was dead and buried, he would stop searching long enough for me to deliver the evidence. My mother was alive. The body in the car belonged to an unidentified woman whose remains had been held pending family notification. The deputy coroner switched case numbers and attached my mother's dental summary. The federal team learned about the substitution only after my mother disappeared, but exposing it immediately would have told Hale his coroner was compromised. I felt sick hearing that. A real woman had died, and her identity had been buried beneath my mother's escape. Audrey later assured me the victim's family was found and informed, but no operation could make that theft harmless. My mother had not chosen the body. She had chosen to exploit the false report after Hale arranged it. He believed he had killed her and made the death official. She survived the sabotage car, escaped before the fire spread, and contacted Audrey from a truck stop. The empty coffin completed Hale's illusion. As of 4 days earlier, Daniel said she had called from a prepaid phone. I asked why she had not called me. Daniel looked at the desk before answering. Because Hale had your phone records. Because the coroner leak had access to local reports. Because every normal route between mother and daughter had become a tripwire. The explanation made sense. It still hurt. Danger can justify silence without making silence painless. For a moment I was furious. She had let me grieve. She had let me stand beside an empty coffin and mourn her in front of everyone. But beneath the anger was relief, so strong I could barely breathe. Show me the drive, I said. Daniel plugged it in. Together, we found spreadsheets, shell company records, altered property transfers, names of local officials, payment trails, and correspondence linking Hale to a deputy coroner. Daniel did not let me look at everything at once. He opened one folder, explained it, closed it, and then opened the next. A widow whose home had been transferred after she signed what she believed was an insurance form. A retired teacher whose annuity vanished into a trust named after a street that did not exist. A grandson overseas receiving letters that looked official enough to delay his questions until the money was gone. Each file turned my private terror into something larger. My mother had not stumbled into one crime. She had found an industry. Then Daniel showed me the pattern Hale used to choose victims. Isolation, recent grief, medical confusion, distance between hairs. It was chilling because it was so practical. He did not need people to be foolish. He needed them to be overwhelmed. He found the moment when grief made paperwork feel impossible, then stepped forward wearing a suit and a voice that promised competence. One spreadsheet contained my name. Hale had opened a life insurance policy using a forged signature and listed a trust company he controlled as beneficiary. If my mother refused to cooperate, I was not merely leverage. I was the next transaction. I read my name again and again. The policy reduced me to a date of birth, a forged signature, and a payout amount. There is a strange violence in seeing yourself converted into paperwork by people who have already practiced making records lie. I thought of the text telling me to come home alone, and realized home might have been the place where they planned to turn me into another file. Audrey moved me to a secure hotel that night. Agents used copies of the red folder while I carried a decoy drive. Hale's people followed Daniel from the recorder's office and attempted to enter his apartment. The arrests began only after agents recorded them demanding the files and threatening to make my death resemble my mother's. The hotel room had beige curtains, a bolted window, and 2 agents in the hallway taking turns with paper cups of coffee. I should have felt safe. Instead, I sat on the bed fully dressed, shoes on, key in my fist, listening for footsteps that paused too long outside the door. Audrey told me fear after pursuit was normal. I told her normal did not make it less exhausting. She agreed and stayed until sunrise. Hale was taken from his office while shredders ran in 3 rooms. Investigators recovered passports, prepaid phones, and a ledger of payments to officials. The black SUV was found behind the building with my mother's blood beneath the rear mat. Audrey later told me the shredder bags were still warm when agents opened them. That image stayed with me. Men in suits feeding evidence into machines, while the woman they thought they had buried kept speaking through copies, drives, keys, and frightened people who finally decided fear was not enough reason to stay silent. My mother had built the entire case. That night, Daniel and I took everything to a federal financial crimes agent named Audrey Marsh. 48 hours later, Richard Hale was arrested. The case eventually involved 11 defendants and more than 60 victims. The number changed how I understood my mother. She had not risked everything for an abstract principle or a stubborn sense of duty. She had seen names, addresses, empty accounts, houses taken from people too stunned to fight. Once she saw them, turning away would have required a different kind of death. Hale denied ordering violence and blamed corrupt employees, but recordings captured him discussing the ravine, the false death record, and how quickly bereaved daughters signed documents. At trial, I testified about the funeral, Unit 16, and the men outside the door. Daniel explained the deed pattern. Earl admitted accepting false burial paperwork and described the moment he realized the coffin contained only weighted bags. The deputy coroner cooperated in exchange for a reduced sentence and confirmed Hale arranged the car fire. Hale watched every witness, as if he could still manage the room by staring hard enough. When I took the stand, he smiled once, almost kindly. That smile returned me to the cemetery, to his hands on my shoulders, to the lie-wearing sympathy. I gripped the rail and told the jury exactly what Earl whispered. I watched one juror's mouth tighten at the words empty coffin, and I knew the illusion had cracked. My mother testified from behind a privacy screen. When her voice entered the courtroom, Hale looked toward it, as if a dead woman had spoken from beneath the floor. The jury convicted him of fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and racketeering. The verdict did not bring the gasp people imagine. It came count by count, the foreperson's voice steady, the courtroom breathing in pieces. My mother lowered her head. Daniel closed his eyes. Hale stared straight ahead, but his jaw worked as if he were chewing something bitter. For the first time since the funeral, I felt the ground under me become solid. Restitution recovered only part of what families lost, but fraudulent property transfers were reversed where possible. For several elderly victims, justice meant receiving keys to homes they had been tricked into surrendering. I attended one of those key returns. A woman named Mrs. Albright stood on the sidewalk outside the bungalow her husband had built in 1968 and sobbed before she could step inside. Hale's companies had owned it on paper for 14 months. Her furniture was gone. The wallpaper had been stripped. But when the lock turned, she pressed her palm against the doorframe and said, "He didn't get to keep it." That sentence sounded like a verdict too. So were two associates and the deputy coroner who had helped falsify my mother's death records. 9 days after the arrests, my mother called from Arizona under federal protection. She sounded tired, older, but alive. I had imagined that if she were alive, joy would erase everything else. Instead, when I heard her say my name, I gripped the hotel phone so hard my knuckles hurt and felt anger rise right beside relief. I wanted to ask how she could let me choose a dress for her funeral. I wanted to ask whether she had watched from somewhere while I placed a rose on an empty coffin. I wanted to ask if saving me had required breaking me first. She told me she had done it to protect me. I told her I understood. I did not tell her I was still angry. Some truths need more than one phone call. Months later, my mother came home. Coming home did not restore the relationship we had before. She expected relief to erase anger. I expected survival to make her honest. Both expectations were unfair. We went to counseling. In the first session, I told her the funeral had forced me to rehearse a life without her. She said telling me earlier might have placed me in danger. I answered that protection without choice can feel like betrayal from the person being protected. The therapist did not let either of us use love as a shortcut. My mother could not say, "I did it for you," and make the pain disappear. I could not say, "You hurt me," and ignore the blood in the SUV. We had to sit inside the contradiction until it stopped demanding a simple answer. She had saved my life. She had also made me mourn her. Both were true. She did not argue. Over time, she described the ravine, the heat of the fire, and the hours she spent hiding with an injured shoulder while Hale's men searched the road. I began to understand the decisions available to her were all terrible. Understanding did not make every decision right. It made forgiveness possible, without pretending there was nothing to forgive. Some nights she could not finish the story. She would stop at the sound of men calling her name through smoke, or the moment she crawled under brush and pressed mud against a bleeding cut to keep from leaving a trail. I learned not to demand the rest. Trauma does not become more honest because someone forces it into a complete sentence. We built the truth slowly, piece by piece, the same way she had built the case. We held a second service for the unidentified woman whose body had been used. Her name was Lillian Price. Her niece attended and placed yellow roses beside a marker bearing the correct name. My mother stood at the back and wept. Lillian had been a retired cafeteria manager, with a laugh everyone described before anything else. Her niece told us she kept peppermints in every coat pocket and never forgot a birthday. Those details mattered. Hale's corruption had tried to turn her into a prop in someone else's disappearance. Saying her name aloud was not enough to repair that theft, but it was the beginning of returning the story to its owner. That service mattered more than the empty funeral. It returned a story to the person from whom it had been stolen. We sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee, and I finally told her what the funeral had done to me. She listened without defending herself. That was the apology I needed before she ever said the words. Listening without defense. Letting my anger exist without reaching for the shield of danger. She cried quietly, and for once I did not comfort her immediately. We sat in the hard part together until the clock ticked loudly enough to remind us we were both alive. I would do it again, she said softly, but I am sorry for the pain. I know, I said, and I did. I still keep the brass key from Unit 16 in a dish on my dresser. Sometimes I look at it and remember the cold weight of it in my hand beside that grave. I also remember that Earl's hand trembled when he passed it to me. Courage is not always steady. Sometimes it shakes, whispers, and hopes the person receiving the key understands quickly enough to run. My mother's choices were not simple. They hurt me. They saved me. I needed years to stop demanding that only one of those things be true. Love became less pure in my mind after that, but more honest. Love became less pure in my mind after that, but more honest. It could still be brave. It could still be protective. But it could also make terrible choices under pressure and owe an apology afterward. Knowing that made forgiveness slower and much more real. The brass key no longer opens anything. Safe lock replaced every lock after the investigation. I keep it because it reminds me that evidence can open a life even after the metal becomes useless. I also keep a copy of Lillian Price's service program beside it. One object reminds me that my mother survived. The other reminds me that survival carried a debt to someone who did not. That balance keeps the story honest. It prevents me from turning our rescue into a clean miracle, when it was built from fear, improvisation, and the stolen identity of a woman who deserved her own mourners from the beginning. And for now, the fact that she is alive is enough to build from. Enough did not mean easy. It meant we had a foundation. Some days that foundation was only a phone call answered honestly, or a visit that ended without secrets. But foundations are supposed to be plain. They hold the weight quietly. My mother's empty coffin taught me that grief can be manufactured, records can lie, and love can wound while trying to protect. What saved us was not a perfect plan. It was the moment each frightened person preserved one piece of the truth, until the pieces could finally find one another. Earl kept the secret of the coffin. Daniel kept copies of deeds. Audrey kept the operation alive despite leaks. My mother kept records while pretending to surrender. I kept moving when every instinct wanted to freeze. None of us held the whole truth safely alone. Together, the pieces became heavy enough to break the lie. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.